Victor was a lonely young duke, cursed with the power to kill any living thing he touched. Everyone feared him except for Alice, his sweet and shameless maid, who took care of him by flaunting her assets and massive plots like it was part of the job. The scene opened with Victor sitting quietly at his desk, writing a letter to his parents. In it, he apologized, saying he was sorry that his deadly curse still hadn't disappeared. As he wrote, his mind drifted back to the moment everything changed. The day his touch accidentally killed a bird, and his mother, horrified, banished him from their home without a second thought. Snapping back to the present, he reached out to touch a flower on the table. The moment his fingers grazed its petals, it crumbled and died. Right then, Alice appeared at his side, completely unannounced. She leaned in close, her massive plots fully on display, giving Victor a shocking view of her plots. Alice poured Victor a cup of tea. As he took a sip, he let out a sigh and began to complain to himself, pointed out how she kept seducing him, even though she knew full well that his touch could kill her. But as he scolded her, his eyes couldn't help but drift just for a second towards her massive plots. Alice noticed immediately. She casually raised her skirt, offering him an even better view. Victor shot up from his seat in pure panic, cheeks flushed. He told her to stop the sexual harassment, as it made him ridiculously hard. Completely unfazed, Alice leaned forward and placed a cookie between her lips, giving him a wicked look. Victor froze, shocked, but he leaned in and took the cookie. The moment their lips nearly touched, his virgin ass almost died from pleasure. Later that day, Victor sat alone on a swing, gently swaying as his thoughts wandered to the past. He recalled with a hazy mind that he had been cursed when he was just 5 years old. The memory of the witch who had cursed him was, almost like a dream, blurred. By time, he had no idea what he had done to deserve such a fate. Ever since that day, his life had been filled with isolation. He was sent away to a remote mansion deep within the forest. He hadn't seen his family since. His thoughts were interrupted by the delicate flutter of a butterfly. Instinctively, he tried to avoid contact, but instead, his hand brushed against a nearby tree. The branch that supported the swing cracked and snapped, sending him tumbling to the ground as he recovered from the fall. Alice appeared above him, lifting the hem of her gown, revealing what's underneath, causing Victor's little Johnny to twitch.
Yes! Yes!
His face turned red immediately, and he warned her to stop doing things like that. She only grinned, claiming that his reactions made it all the more fun to tease him. Ignoring his protest, she raised her gown again, claiming she just wanted to cheer him up. Victor, flustered and breathless, reminded her that he was still a man, and if she kept tempting him like that, he might actually give in. Smirking, Alice stepped closer and pinned him gently to the tree. Without touching him, Anne playfully asked whether he ever wondered what it would be like to touch her. Victor's heart pounded as he struggled to find an answer. The next morning, Alice greeted Victor in bed with a bowl of water to wash his face. After he finished cleaning up, she brought him breakfast. Victor, still shaken by the events of the previous day, said he wasn't hungry, but Alice insisted, gently persuading him until he finally gave in. As he opened his mouth to eat, Alice froze, completely distracted by his lips. Victor noticed her intense stare and grew uncomfortable. She quickly apologized and awkwardly asked if he wanted to look into her mouth too, causing Victor to become embarrassed and insist on eating by himself. Curious, Alice asked him why he seemed so disinterested in meals. Victor explained that, ever since the curse, mealtime had become one of the worst parts of his day. Eating reminded him of everything he'd lost: touch, warmth, and human connection. After he finished, Alice cleared the table and informed him that his childhood friend wanted to visit him the next day. Victor was instantly anxious, considered canceling, but Alice told him it was too late. What surprised him even more was that she remembered Philip, and even overheard him rehearsing what to say when Philip arrived. For the first time in a while, Victor found himself looking forward to something, and he decided to change his outfit. Alice suggested he lose the hat, but Victor refused, claiming he'd look uncool without it. She disagreed and moved in closer, pointing out his unique features. Then, without touching him, she leaned in for a kiss, leaving Victor shy and speechless.
I'm gonna come. Oh.
Moments later, she returned with his clothes and offered to help him change. When he refused, she threatened to start undressing herself if he didn't cooperate, while changing into his tuxedo. Victor explained that he was very hopeful about the meeting with Philip. He explained that Philip had always treated him differently. He was the only one who didn't avoid him or look at him like a monster. He hoped they could be friends again. Alice helped him with his tie, though her chest ended up far too close to his face. Victor blushed deeply and asked her not to act that way in front of Philip. He didn't want anyone else seeing her like that. Alice reassured him that her teasing was reserved for him alone.
Yeah, boy.
When Philip finally arrived, Victor greeted him awkwardly at the door and tried to break the ice by bringing up an old prank. Philip grew uneasy and apologized, But Victor clarified that he did not mean it in a bad way. As Victor stepped closer, Philip's bodyguard intervened. They all sat down at the table, but the atmosphere was tense. Trying to keep things casual, he asked Philip what brought him here. Philip hesitated, then said he simply wanted to visit an old friend. He also noticed Alice and questioned her presence, making Victor uncomfortable. Victor explained that his usual butler was sick and that Alice was helping him in the meantime. During the conversation, Philip took out a cigarette, and his bodyguard leaned over to light it but accidentally hit the table, knocking over a vase. Victor instinctively reached out and caught it, but the flower inside died on contact. Everyone went silent. Philip looked horrified. He stood up to leave, asking first to use the restroom. Alice offered to guide him. On the way, Philip stopped her and told her to leave the mansion, saying it was too dangerous for her to stay with Victor. Alice refused, telling him to get his stinky breath out of her face.
So, that one there was a violation. Personally, I wouldn't have it.
Victor, who overheard everything, confronted Philip. He stepped closer, only to be blocked by Philip's cane. That's when Philip finally called him a monster. The word hit hard. Philip admitted that he didn't come willingly. He had been sent by Victor's mother, Gerber, to check on him. He added that there were rumors circulating that Victor's younger brother might inherit the family title soon. If that happened, Philip said, his family would cut ties with Victor entirely. As he walked past Victor, Philip confessed that he wasn't just afraid, he also felt pity. He insisted he was only telling the truth and said this will be the last time he will visit. Alice comforted Victor, but Victor brushed it off and asked to be called when dinner was ready. Later, Victor sat alone in the garden, silently reminiscing about all the memories he shared with Philip. With a knife in hand, he began cutting flower petals one by one, asking the questions he did not dare say out loud. Will the curse be broken? Will his family take him back? Does Alice truly like him? When only one petal remained, it suggested that Alice did in fact like him. Just then, Alice appeared and told him dinner was ready. On their walk back to the house, Victor opened up. He admitted to Alice that he didn't feel like he had the right to love her. He reminded her that he could not even touch her, and that he might never know the warmth of someone's skin. A hug, or the shared tears of love. Even giving her a flower was a cruel gesture, as it would die in his hands. Alice gently took the wilted flower from him and smiled. She told him that a withered white rose symbolized a vow to dedicate one's entire life to another. To her, that was more than enough. She then promised to help him break the curse, no matter what it took. Victor was moved beyond words. For the first time, he imagined a future where he might be able to put a ring on her finger with his own hands.
That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
Victor was quietly reading when Alice suddenly appeared beside him, standing far too close for comfort. Startled, he leaned back, trying to create some distance. She simply chuckled and remarked that his shy reactions were adorable. Embarrassed, Victor covered his eyes, claiming that if he couldn't see her, he would not get so self-conscious. The door opened, and Rob the mansion butler returned, announcing that he had fully recovered and was ready to resume his duties. Victor welcomed him back with a smile. Rob apologized to Alice for leaving her with all the household responsibilities in his absence, but she quickly reassured him it was no trouble, saying with a mischievous smirk that she got to spend the night with Victor.
What do you mean by that?
Victor, face flushed, scolded her for phrasing it that way, reminding her that it could easily be misinterpreted. Once Rob finished his tasks, he politely excused himself, leaving Victor and Alice alone. The two briefly discussed how hardworking Rob was, especially considering he had just recovered. Victor looked out the window and called him a superhuman, saying aloud that Rob had been his butler ever since he lived with his family. He was the only one who had followed him into exile at the mansion, and in many ways, Victor admitted, Rob had always been like a father figure to him. Returning to his seat, Victor glanced at Alice and asked why she was still standing around. She shrugged and said that Rob had taken over all the duties, then jokingly asked if her presence was bothering him. Before he could answer, there was a knock at the door. It was Rob again, though Victor was confused as he had just seen him moments ago, serving Victor with his usual grace. Victor expressed concern, urging Rob to rest and let Alice take on some of the work. Rob agreed, assuring him he'd share the tasks with her moving forward. As the two left the room, Alice gave Victor a teasing glimpse under her gown, making him momentarily forget the conversation entirely. Later, as Victor strolled through the hallway, he heard Rob calling out to Alice behind him. Out of nowhere, Rob reached toward him, mistaking him for someone else. Victor stepped aside quickly, avoiding contact. When Rob heard Victor's voice, he paused and apologized, explaining that his eyesight had been blurry lately. Victor dodged another clumsy reach and reminded Rob that a touch from him can be deadly. Rob leaned in, having a problem with his hearing. At that moment, Alice appeared. Victor asked her for help managing Rob, especially as Rob suddenly cupped Alice's face to confirm it was really her. Victor watched, disturbed and slightly confused. He hit a vase, but Rob skillfully caught it, assuring him that everything was fine. but pulled his back when bowing. Later, Victor was seen writing music. He confessed to himself that if his family were to disown him entirely, his only hope would be to survive through music. The piano was his dream, the one way he used to feel alive. Suddenly, Alice appeared behind him, startling him. She apologized, saying she had heard the melody while cleaning. Victor, embarrassed, scolded her, telling her to get back to work, especially since Rob was supposed to be resting. But as Alice bent over to clean in front of him, he couldn't help but stare. She noticed immediately and teased him, but Victor accused her of doing it on purpose.
So that was a f***ing lie.
He set up a chair and asked Alice to sit and watch him play. Cleaning could wait. He couldn't concentrate with her moving around like that. Alice agreed and sat quietly as Victor began to play. As the final note faded, Alice complimented him, touched by the piece. Victor shyly admitted he had composed it for her, using his cap to hide his blushing face. Afterward, he decided to take a nap and asked Alice to wake him when dinner was ready. She leaned in and playfully asked if she could kiss him goodnight. But just before their lips could come close, she stopped and pulled away, saying she was only joking. She suggested he nap in bed instead. Though he tried to act unfazed, Victor was clearly flustered. Meanwhile, at the family mansion, Viola excused herself from dinner, claiming she was on a diet. Once in the hallway, however, she asked for a crumbled apple, confessing that she was starving. Skipping off cheerfully, back at the mansion, Victor's music session was interrupted again, this time by Viola herself. She strolled into the room uninvited, loudly complaining about how gloomy the mansion felt. Victor tried to stay out of her way, but eventually she acknowledged him and asked how long it had been since they'd last seen each other. Victor yelled for Alice. When Alice arrived, he scolded her for letting Viola in without his permission. But Viola brushed it off and instructed her guards to wait outside. As Alice served them snacks, Viola noticed how Victor kept glancing at Alice. With a smirk, she concluded that he was in love. Deciding to help, Viola offered to teach him her secrets in the art of love. She suggested he do something about the dark circles under his eyes. Victor, attempting to cover them with his hat, was immediately mocked. Viola told him he didn't have what it takes to be a proper ladies' man. As she finally prepared to leave, Victor asked her not to show up uninvited again. Viola, ignoring him, said he better hurry up and break his curse so they could return to living together. She added that she wasn't saying this because she cared. On her way out, she bumped into someone and was about to scold them until she realized it was Rob. Her entire attitude changed. Shy and flustered, she quietly excused herself, and Victor couldn't help but notice her sudden interest in the butler. Later, Victor called out to Alice, terrified. She found him crouched on the floor, hiding from a black cat that had wandered into the piano room. He refused to enter the room as long as the cat was there. Alice, amused, dismissed his fear and picked up the cat, noting the collar around its neck. But suddenly, the cat leapt from her arms and lunged at Victor, who barely dodged the attack. Rob rushed in to help but mistakenly tackled the cat, thinking it was Victor in disguise. Realizing his error, he released it, and the cat resumed its chase. Victor fled toward the stairs, while Alice teased him by showing how the cat had torn her dress, exposing more than he was ready to see. Eventually, they discovered the cat had been after Victor's bow tie. Rob found a note tucked into the cat's collar. It read, "Please forgive me." Victor later sat outside, quietly watching the cat eat. He murmured that it must have been abandoned, just like him. Another soft meow caught his attention, and he looked up to see a mother cat nearby with a litter of kittens. Alice and Rob approached and told him his tea was ready. As they headed back inside, that night, Victor stood on the balcony, staring at the moon. Alice joined him and gently reminded him that dinner was ready. Curious, she asked what he was thinking about. Victor explained that Rob had once told him his grandfather used to practice in that very ballroom, and that Alice's mother had been his dance partner. Then, turning to her, he invited her to dance. Alice, flattered but playful, told him he had to ask properly. So he did, formally and sincerely. She finally agreed, and the two began to dance, moving close, but always careful not to touch.
God in heaven. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful.
No words. No words.
The next morning began as usual. Victor was trying to enjoy a quiet moment when Alice greeted him by getting far too close, invading his personal space with that same playful energy he had grown both wary of and fond of. Victor was playing pool, while Alice and Rob stood by, cheering him on with exaggerated excitement. Eventually, Alice asked to join the game. Victor agreed, but she suggested raising the stakes. Whoever lost would have to do whatever the winner asked. He hesitated, but accepted. Alice took the first shot. Victor found it hard to focus, not because of the game, but because of how she displayed her massive plots, her posture far too suggestive for someone who claimed to be just playing. The match continued and soon came down to a final, deciding shot. As Victor lined up his shot, Alice leaned in and told him not to put it in there, sending his imagination into overdrive. The distraction worked, he missed. Now it was Alice's turn, and she sunk the ball effortlessly. Victor tensed, expecting her to request something wildly inappropriate. Instead, she simply asked him to accompany her to town. In the garden, he asked why the sudden interest in going out. Alice explained that a costume festival was taking place, and as long as he wore something thick enough, he could walk among people without hurting anyone, though he was reluctant. Alice's usual antics and persuasive charm won him over. Once they arrived in town, Victor found his bulky costume cumbersome. He complimented Alice's outfit, which was both elegant and dangerously cute. As they made their way through the crowd, someone nearly bumped into Victor. Alice instinctively reached out to hold him back, but he warned her not to touch. Asked if he wanted to go home, but he said he'd stay a little longer. Unaware that Victor had gotten separated, Alice kept chatting, thinking he was still behind her. Meanwhile, Victor was struggling to navigate the crowd and was eventually swept away by the moving mass of people. He stumbled into a public square and realized he was lost. There, a crying boy clung to his robe, lost and frightened. Victor gently comforted him, telling him not to cry. He noticed a nearby piano and decided to play a tune to lift the boy's spirits. It was his first time performing in public, and he felt a wave of anxiety, but as he continued playing, other musicians joined in. Soon, the square was filled with laughter, dancing, and clapping. Victor stopped playing once the boy's mother arrived. They shared a warm goodbye, and Victor resumed his search for Alice. Suddenly, she popped her head through the collar of his costume, scolding him for getting lost while expressing her relief at finding him. Victor, flustered, told her off for always getting so close. Alice assumed he was tired and suggested they go home, but Victor surprised her by saying he wanted to stay longer. Alice, mused, asked if he was really still Victor. The festival carried on into the evening. At a mask shop, they were told that the designs were inspired by the legend of Death Incarnate, who lived in a forest mansion. It was an uncomfortable reminder of how the world saw him. Alice quickly pulled him away, trying to lift his spirits. Later, at a quiet bridge, Victor admitted that the rumors clearly pointed to him. Despite feeling down, he tried to enjoy his ice cream, even offering Alice a bite. She accepted it with a teasingly seductive bite that nearly made him drop the cone. Then she suggested they climb the nearby clock tower at the top. Victor admired the glowing city below and the moon above. Alice, in a softer tone, shared a fairy tale, a story about a princess who fell in love with a brave prince. On the night of their wedding, a jealous witch stole the prince away to the moon. Each year, on the anniversary of their love, the princess would kiss the moon, hoping her prince would feel it from afar. Victor reflected on how similar it felt, the distance between him and Alice. Even while standing side by side, he confessed his deep love for her, but lamented that he couldn't even hold her. Not even on a night like this. Alice grinned and teased him about overhearing him calling it a date earlier. Victor apologized for not making it special, but Alice reassured him that it was perfect. She told him to keep her clothes as a memory. Despite knowing they could never truly touch, later that night, Victor approached her room with a letter in hand. He knocked, and she invited him in. When he opened the door, he was shocked to find her not dressed. Quickly, he shut the door and asked her to put something on. She called him in again, now fully dressed. He complimented her look. The room smelled pleasantly sweet. She'd lit a scented candle. Alice offered him tea. As he hesitated, his eyes landed on an item of her lingerie on the table, making him suspicious. Just then, Alice appeared behind him with the tea in hand. He accepted it, nervously sipping, convinced she was up to something. She then suggested they should go to bed. Victor, flustered, gulped down the tea and looked away. Alice asked him to take off his clothes. He did, reluctantly reminding her they couldn't touch. But she told him not to worry and to trust her. His face turned red. "She's serious tonight," he muttered under his breath. She blew out the candle and asked him to lie down. As he did, still unsure what to expect, she gently covered him with a blanket and simply wished him good night.
Come on now, dog. Come on, man.
Felt more disappointed than relieved. Alice asked if he had come because he couldn't sleep. She explained everything she'd done was to help him relax, apologizing for the misunderstanding, but both of them knew it was intentional. Victor asked if she'd like to go out again in 2 nights. He told her there was something he wanted to show her. 2 nights later, Victor and Alice sat quietly in a small boat beneath the stars. She assumed he had brought her to see the once-a-decade meteor shower. Victor smiled and admitted he'd seen it as a child and dreamed of seeing it again with her. As the moment neared, he checked the time and told her to look up. Instead, Alice said she'd rather look at him. It was more fun. Just then, a gust of wind blew off Victor's hat. As Alice reached for it, she slipped and fell into the water. Victor panicked and reached out his hand, but remembered his curse and pulled back. Alice told him if he truly felt something for her, he should kiss her. Victor trembled. He wanted to, desperately. but he hesitated, terrified she would die. He said he couldn't. In a sudden move, Alice tipped the boat, sending him into the water. Laughing, she told him she just wanted him to get a little exercise. Unfortunately, they'd missed the meteor shower. Later, as Alice wrung the water from her clothes, Victor sulked. He regretted missing the rare event and cursed himself for not being able to confess his feelings. Embarrassed, he suggested they head home. As they walked back, Victor scolded himself for turning Alice down so coldly, and quietly hoped he hadn't broken her heart.